I need to talk to you about this weekend, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. My husband Michael looked up from his laptop, distracted. This weekend? What about it? I placed the evidence on the coffee table between us, a printed photo of him with another woman, both wearing happy anniversary crowns at an upscale restaurant. The same restaurant where I'd made reservations for our surprise celebration. The same night I'd stood with 50 guests, waiting for a husband who never arrived. You weren't stuck at a medical conference in Denver, I said, each word precise and controlled. You were celebrating your 5th anniversary with her in Chicago, the same weekend as our 10th. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land, gasping for explanations that couldn't possibly exist. My hands should have been shaking, my voice should have cracked. But discovering your entire marriage is a lie creates a strange, crystalline calm, the eye of a hurricane where everything is eerily still while destruction swirls around you. How do you process learning that the man who kissed you goodbye on Thursday has another wife celebrating another anniversary on Friday? How do you comprehend that the life you've built for a decade runs parallel to a completely separate existence? And how do I tell 50 guests hiding in a darkened reception hall that the reason my husband is late to his surprise anniversary party is because he's busy celebrating a different anniversary altogether? I'd spent 3 months planning the perfect 10th anniversary surprise. Michael and I had married young, right after medical school for him, halfway through my MBA for me. We'd postponed proper celebrations while building our careers, so our 10th felt significant enough to justify something extravagant. The guest list included everyone important in our lives, his colleagues from the hospital, my business partners, college friends who'd flown in from across the country, both sets of parents. I'd rented the private room at Maison Laurent, where we'd had our first real date. I'd commissioned a custom cake recreating our wedding design. I'd prepared a slideshow of our decade together. Michael was supposed to be at a medical conference in Denver, returning Friday evening. The plan was perfect. His colleague Jamie would suggest they grab dinner straight from the airport, then bring him to the restaurant where we'd all be waiting. I'd arranged everything down to the last detail. Except Michael never arrived. Jamie called me from the airport, confused. Michael wasn't on the flight from Denver. In fact, the conference staff confirmed he'd never checked in. His presentation slot had been filled by another doctor when he didn't show. The first jolt of fear hit me then. Had something happened to him? Was he hurt? I called his cell repeatedly, each unanswered ring escalating my panic. I texted, emailed, even called the hospital to see if he'd been admitted as a patient. Meanwhile, 50 people waited at the restaurant, the surprise now turning awkward as minutes stretched into an hour. I made strained excuses about flight delays while frantically trying to locate my husband. It was my friend Danielle who suggested checking our credit card app. Just to see if there's been any recent activity, she said, her tone carefully neutral. To make sure he's okay. The transaction list loaded on my phone, a charge from yesterday at the Peninsula Hotel, not in Denver, but in Chicago. A significant amount at Adesso, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, a jewelry store purchased that morning. I'm sure there's an explanation, Danielle said, but her expression told a different story. I called the Peninsula. With a confidence I didn't know I possessed, I explained that I needed to reach my husband, Dr. Michael Harmon, who was staying there. Without hesitation, the receptionist connected me to his room. A woman answered. Hello? Her voice was sleepy, comfortable, intimate. I hung up immediately, my hands now shaking so badly I dropped my phone. Danielle picked it up, took one look at my face, and took charge. Something's come up, she announced to the increasingly uncomfortable guests. Family emergency, I'm so sorry, everyone. What followed was a blur of awkward departures, concerned questions, and my wooden responses. My parents knew something was terribly wrong, but didn't press when I said I'd explain later. Michael's parents looked confused, then concerned, then suspicious in quick succession. After everyone left, Danielle drove me home, staying until I insisted I needed to be alone. Call me anytime, she said, hugging me tightly. day or night. I sat in my silent house, surrounded by anniversary decorations I'd hidden to put up after the party. Banners, photos, mementos from 10 years of what I'd thought was a happy marriage. Each item now seemed to mock me with its cheerful celebration of a relationship that apparently didn't exist as I'd understood it. Around midnight, I created a fake Instagram account and searched for Michael. His profile was private and carefully maintained, the one I knew, with occasional posts about work, our vacations, nothing revealing. But Instagram's algorithm helpfully suggested similar accounts you might like, including one for a Rebecca Harmon. The profile picture showed Michael with a woman I'd never seen. Blonde, petite, smiling up at him adoringly. Her profile was public, filled with photos of them together over what appeared to be years. Weekend trips, holiday celebrations, cozy home scenes in an apartment I'd never seen. And most recently, an anniversary post. 5 wonderful years with this man. Can't believe he surprised me with a weekend at the peninsula. Anniversary, 5 years, blessed. The timestamp yesterday. My husband of 10 years was celebrating a 5-year anniversary with another woman who shared his last name. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me as impossible questions flooded my mind. How could he maintain 2 complete lives? Where did he actually go during his frequent conferences? Did he have another job? Another family? How many lies had I believed? Outside, a spring storm had gathered, rain now lashing against the windows, thunder rumbling ominously. The weather matched the tempest building inside me, shock giving way to devastation, giving way to a cold, clear rage I'd never experienced before. I printed one photo from Rebecca's profile, their anniversary dinner, both wearing paper crowns provided by the restaurant, glasses raised in celebration. Then I waited for my husband to return from his other anniversary, to his other wife. Michael and I met during my final year of undergraduate studies. I was pre-MBA, working part-time at the University Hospital Administration Office. He was a second-year medical student doing clinical rotations. Our first conversation happened when he came to dispute a parking ticket. I was impressed by his articulate appeal. He was charmed by my willingness to help navigate the bureaucracy. Our courtship progressed with the intensity common to ambitious young people. Stolen hours between his brutal study schedule and my GMAT preparation, late-night conversations about our dreams, the exhilarating recognition of finding someone equally driven but in complementary fields. We married after dating for 2 years, a small ceremony that accommodated our limited budget and time constraints. Michael was starting his residency. I was halfway through my MBA program. Our early marriage was a partnership of shared ambition, separate career tracks but unified life goals. The sacrifices seemed worthwhile and equally distributed. I took a corporate job with regular hours to provide stability while he endured the grueling residency schedule. When he finally became an attending physician, he supported me through launching my own consulting firm. We bought our house in the suburbs 3 years ago, a symbol of our successful trajectory. Michael's specialty in emergency medicine came with irregular hours and frequent conferences, a schedule that had become our normal. He typically worked 3 or 4 12-hour shifts each week, with multiple days off between. Those free weekdays were when he claimed to catch up on medical journals, serve on hospital committees, or attend professional development events. I traveled occasionally for client meetings, but my schedule was more predictable. We'd settled into comfortable routines for when our time aligned. Sunday brunches, monthly date nights, annual vacations carefully planned around hospital staffing calendars. Looking back with newly suspicious eyes, I could identify potential warning signs. Michael insisted on maintaining separate financial accounts alongside our joint household account, explaining it as easier for tax purposes, given his various medical speaking engagements and consulting work. He managed his own professional calendar rather than using our shared system. He was meticulous about handling his own laundry, a habit I'd appreciated rather than questioned. His conferences had increased in frequency over the past 5 years, now that I calculated the pattern, often in Chicago, though sometimes in other major cities, usually spanning weekends, always with legitimate-sounding medical organizations that, I now realized with sickening clarity, I had never actually verified. 5 years. The timeline matched perfectly with Rebecca Harmon's anniversary celebration. I'd always trusted Michael implicitly. We'd built what I thought was an honest relationship based on mutual respect and shared goals. While passion had perhaps cooled with time and familiarity, I'd never doubted our fundamental connection or commitment. Now I questioned everything, every business trip, every late night at the hospital, every unexplained absence. Had our entire relationship been performative? Was anything real? The Michael I thought I knew couldn't possibly maintain such an elaborate deception, yet the evidence suggested I'd never really known him at all. As I waited for his return, I scrolled through photos on my phone. Us at his hospital fundraiser last month, hiking in Colorado last summer, at my parents' anniversary dinner at Christmas. His smile appeared genuine in each image. His affection seemed real. How could someone fake connection so convincingly for years? More disturbing still, if he had maintained 2 separate lives for 5 years, what had happened during the 5 years before that? Had there been others? Was our entire relationship built on deception, or had something changed midway through our marriage? The questions multiplied without answers, each more painful than the last. By morning, I had moved beyond shock into a strange, calm clarity. I needed truth, no matter how devastating. I needed to understand not just what had happened, but how it had been possible without my knowledge. When I heard his key in the lock around noon on Saturday, nearly 24 hours after he was supposed to have returned from his fictional Denver conference, I was sitting calmly in the living room, the printed photo on the coffee table between us, prepared for the confrontation that would either explain the inexplicable or end a decade of shared life. Michael entered our home with the casual confidence of someone expecting business as usual, rolling his carry-on suitcase, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door, calling out, "I'm home!" with cheerful normalcy. He stopped abruptly when he saw me sitting in the dimly lit living room. I hadn't opened the curtains, hadn't turned on music or television, just sat in silence, waiting. "Elise, why are you sitting in the dark? Is everything okay?" His tone conveyed perfect concern, his expression appropriately puzzled. If I hadn't seen the evidence myself, I might have questioned my own sanity rather than his honesty. "How was Denver?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "Exhausting," he sighed, setting down his suitcase. The conference was valuable, but the scheduling was brutal. Back-to-back sessions, barely time to eat. He moved toward me, presumably for a welcome home kiss. I held up my hand, stopping him. "That's interesting, since the conference organizers said you never checked in, never gave your presentation, were never even registered." He froze mid-step. A flash of something, panic, calculation, crossed his features before he composed himself. There must be some misunderstanding. I was definitely there. "No, Michael, you definitely weren't." I gestured to the coffee table. "You were in Chicago, at the Peninsula Hotel, with Rebecca." He didn't immediately look at the photo, keeping his eyes fixed on me instead, assessing, planning. This calculating stranger wearing my husband's face was perhaps the most disturbing part of the moment, watching him strategize his response rather than react with genuine emotion. When he finally glanced down at the evidence, his expression changed, not to shock or shame, but something closer to resignation. He sank into the chair across from me, shoulders slumping slightly. "How did you find out?" he asked quietly. The question infuriated me with its implicit acceptance that deception was the default, discovery the aberration, as if his only mistake had been getting caught. "You missed our anniversary party," I said, each word precise and cutting. 50 people waiting to surprise you, including your parents, who flew in from Phoenix. But you were too busy celebrating your other anniversary with your other wife." His head snapped up. "Rebecca isn't my wife." I laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Really? That's your first concern? Her exact legal status? She calls herself Rebecca Harmon on social media. You're wearing matching anniversary crowns in this photo. You've been with her for 5 years while married to me for 10. The terminology seems like the least important detail. It's complicated, he offered weakly. Then uncomplicate it, I demanded. Explain to me how my husband has been living a double life for 5 years without my knowledge. Explain how you've maintained 2 separate relationships, 2 separate homes, 2 separate existences. Explain why our 10th anniversary meant so little that you scheduled your 5th anniversary celebration with her on the same weekend. He ran his hands through his hair, a familiar gesture that now seemed like it belonged to a stranger. I never meant for any of this to happen. Things don't just happen, Michael. You made thousands of deliberate choices. Every lie, every deception, every moment you spent with her while I thought you were somewhere else, those were all choices. I know, he acknowledged, meeting my gaze directly for the first time. And I know nothing I say will make this better, but if you want the truth, I'll tell you everything. Start with who she is, I said, needing concrete facts before addressing the emotional devastation. I met Rebecca 5 years ago at a medical conference in Chicago. A real one, he added, as if this partial honesty deserved recognition. She's a pharmaceutical representative. The connection was immediate, intense. I told myself it would be just a conference fling. But it wasn't, I prompted when he paused. No, we kept in touch. I found reasons to return to Chicago. Eventually, she believed I was divorced, working primarily in Chicago, but occasionally in other cities, including here. The calculated nature of the deception stunned me. She thinks you're divorced? Does she know I exist at all? He looked down. She knows I was previously married. She doesn't know the marriage is ongoing. And the Harmon name? The anniversary celebrations? We had a commitment ceremony last year. Not legally binding, obviously, but meaningful to her. She started using my name socially afterward. Each revelation felt like another blow, but I pressed on, needing to understand the full scope of his deception. Where does she think you are when you're here with me? Working at Northwestern Memorial. I told her I'm based primarily in Chicago, but take periodic consulting assignments in other hospital systems. So your entire schedule is inverted. When you're supposedly at conferences, you're actually with me. When you're supposedly working here, you're actually with her. I pieced together the elaborate structure of his dual existence. The separate finances, the self-managed calendar, the independent laundry, all designed to maintain the deception. He nodded, a flicker of something like relief crossing his features, perhaps at no longer needing to maintain the lies, or possibly pride in the elaborate system he'd created. Do you have a place in Chicago? I continued, cataloging the practical aspects before allowing myself to process the emotional betrayal. A condo near Lincoln Park, purchased 3 years ago. The casual admission of this major financial decision made without my knowledge struck like a physical blow. You bought real estate without telling me? It's in my name only from my separate accounts. Money that should have been part of our shared resources, I noted. How much of our financial planning has been based on incomplete information? How many other assets or accounts exist that I don't know about? He hesitated. There's a separate retirement account and an investment portfolio. Each revelation expanded the scope of betrayal beyond the affair itself, to encompass every aspect of our shared life. Nothing remained untouched by deception. Does she know you're here now? I asked. She thinks I'm at a medical conference in Boston until Monday. The symmetry was almost elegant, each woman believing he was at a conference when he was actually with the other. A perfectly balanced system of lies. And our anniversary? You knew that was this weekend. For the first time, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. I got the dates confused. Rebecca planned the Chicago celebration as a surprise. By the time I realized the conflict, I couldn't find a way to reschedule without raising suspicions. So you chose her anniversary over ours. It wasn't a choice like that, he protested. I didn't know you had planned anything special. Because it was a surprise, I said. the absurdity of the situation suddenly striking me. A surprise party you missed because you were at a surprise party with someone else. If it weren't so devastating, it would be almost funny. We sat in silence for several moments, the magnitude of the situation settling between us. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving an incongruously beautiful spring day, sunlight streaming through windows I still hadn't opened. "What happens now?" Michael finally asked. The question crystallized everything. He wasn't denying anything, wasn't begging forgiveness, wasn't even particularly apologetic. He was simply waiting to see which way the wind would blow, whether his carefully constructed dual life would continue or collapse. "Now," I said, standing to create physical distance from this stranger wearing my husband's face, "you need to leave. I need time to process the fact that my entire marriage has been at least partially fictional. I need to consult with a lawyer about the financial deceptions alone, not to mention the rest of it." "Elise, please." "Please what, Michael? Please forgive the 5 years of continuous lies? Please understand why you've been living with another woman who thinks she's your wife? Please accept that you've been systematically deceiving both of us for half our marriage?" "I never meant to hurt you," he said, the platitude so inadequate it bordered on insulting. "Yet you made thousands of choices that inevitably would," I countered. "Every time you went to Chicago, every time you created a fictional conference, every time you purchased property or invested money without my knowledge. Each decision guaranteed this moment would eventually arrive." He had no response to this undeniable logic. "I'll go to a hotel," he finally said, standing. "Give you some space." "Or Chicago," I suggested with bitter humor. "You apparently have a condo there." He picked up his suitcase, still packed from his weekend with Rebecca, and moved toward the door. "Can I call you tomorrow to talk about next steps?" "Next steps," I repeated incredulously. "You've been living a complete double life for 5 years, and you want to discuss next steps tomorrow?" "No, Michael. There will be no casual phone call tomorrow. My lawyer will contact you when I've decided how to proceed." At the door, he paused, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Regret, perhaps, but not for his actions. More likely regret for their discovery. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I did love you, still do in my way." "Your way," I replied, "is worth absolutely nothing to me now." After he left, I finally opened the curtains, letting sunlight flood the room that had contained so many shadows. The light revealed dust on surfaces, smudges on windows, imperfections I hadn't noticed in the dimness. An apt metaphor for my marriage, I thought bitterly. What had seemed perfect in partial light revealed its flaws in full illumination. I moved methodically through the house, gathering evidence of Michael's deception. His separate financial statements, his calendar, his passport with entry stamps corresponding to trips I'd known nothing about. Each discovery expanded my understanding of how elaborate his dual life had been, how intentional every aspect of the deception. By evening, I had compiled enough documentation to understand that this betrayal went beyond emotional infidelity to encompass significant financial deception as well. Tomorrow would bring practical considerations, lawyers, accountants, difficult conversations with family members. But tonight, I allowed myself to fully feel the grief for a decade of life built on foundations that had been, at least partially, illusory. The strangest part was realizing that while my marriage had been real to me, it had been merely one compartment of Michael's life, a partial commitment, a timeshare arrangement rather than a full residence. I had given him everything while receiving only the portion of himself he'd allocated to this particular relationship. The betrayal wasn't just that he'd loved someone else. It was that he'd made me an unwitting participant in a life structured around deception. He'd stolen my ability to make informed choices about my own existence. That theft of agency, more than the emotional betrayal, felt unforgivable. The practical dismantling of a 10-year marriage built on deception proved nearly as complex as the deception itself. The day after Michael left, I contacted Diana Levinson, a divorce attorney recommended by my friend Danielle. Diana's reputation for handling high-conflict cases with complicated financial aspects made her perfectly suited for my situation. In 20 years of practice, she said after reviewing my initial documentation, I've seen plenty of double lives, but rarely one maintained so successfully for so long. This will require forensic accounting to uncover the full extent of hidden assets. The financial investigation revealed what Diana called systematic diversion of resources. Michael had been funneling approximately 40% of his income to separate accounts and investments for years, while maintaining the appearance of fully contributing to our joint financial goals. The Chicago condo, purchased 3 years earlier for $850,000, had been funded through an LLC created without my knowledge. A separate retirement account contained nearly $400,000. He's been essentially funding 2 complete households, Diana explained during our third meeting, which means both households have been living on partial resources while he presented each arrangement as financially transparent. The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed, largely because Michael offered minimal resistance. When presented with the comprehensive evidence of financial deception, he agreed to a settlement that heavily favored me, perhaps hoping to avoid the professional consequences that might come from a more public legal battle. Telling family and friends proved almost as difficult as the legal proceedings. My parents responded with stunned support, my father's initial rage giving way to protective concern. We never saw any sign, my mother repeated, bewildered. He seemed so devoted to you. Michael's parents were similarly shocked, their confusion compounded by meeting me for the supposed anniversary party just before everything collapsed. His mother called me, sobbing, to say she'd had no idea about Rebecca's existence. We thought he was working those weekends he couldn't visit, she said. He told us his schedule at the hospital was particularly demanding. Friends reacted with varying degrees of disbelief, support, and occasionally unwelcome curiosity about the salacious details. I found myself withdrawing from all but my closest circle, unwilling to repeatedly explain a situation I myself was still struggling to comprehend. The most surreal aspect of the aftermath was discovering through social media that Rebecca had also learned the truth. Her Instagram profile, previously filled with happy couple photos, abruptly changed to travel images and inspirational quotes about new beginnings. Her relationship status changed to single. Her last name reverted to what I presumed was her original surname. I never contacted her directly. Whatever conversation occurred between her and Michael remained between them, though I imagined her shock and pain mirrored my own. We were both victims of the same elaborate deception, both left questioning how we could have missed the signs for so long. 6 weeks after discovery, with divorce proceedings well underway, I experienced what my therapist later called delayed traumatic response. The initial shock and focus on practical matters had kept me functioning with artificial composure. When those immediate concerns were addressed, the emotional reality finally hit with full force. I called in sick to work for the first time in years. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, spent hours staring at wedding photos, searching for clues I might have missed, signs that might have alerted me to the partial nature of Michael's commitment. Had there been a flicker of reservation in his eyes when he'd said his vows? Had his smile contained a hint of deception in our anniversary photos? The questions became obsessive, extending beyond Michael to everyone in my life. If I had so completely misjudged the person closest to me, how could I trust my judgment about anyone? This erosion of basic trust proved perhaps the most devastating consequence of Michael's deception, not just the loss of the relationship, but the loss of fundamental confidence in my own perceptions. My therapist, Dr. Marshall, helped me understand that Michael's successful deception reflected his exceptional capacity for compartmentalization rather than any failure of perception on my part. Some people can maintain separate psychological spaces with unusual effectiveness, she explained. It's not that you missed obvious signs, it's that he was extraordinarily skilled at presenting a consistent, convincing persona in each context. This framework provided some comfort, though the fundamental questions remained. Had any part of our relationship been genuine? Had he ever been fully present or always partially elsewhere? Had I been married to a real person or merely a carefully maintained facade? 2 months after discovery, I received an unexpected email from Michael, the first direct communication since he'd left our home. The message was neither defensive nor pleading, but reflective in a way that suggested therapy or at least serious self-examination. "I know no apology can address the magnitude of what I've done," he wrote. "I won't insult you by trying to explain or justify my actions. I just want you to know that the compartmentalization that allowed me to maintain 2 separate lives wasn't because either relationship was insignificant to me. Paradoxically, it was because both were meaningful in different ways. My connection with you was real, even if my presence was partial. I understand this provides no comfort and changes nothing about the pain I've caused. I just couldn't bear the thought of you believing our entire history was fabricated, even though my actions have given you every reason to think exactly that." I didn't respond. Whatever genuine reflection Michael might be experiencing came far too late to matter. The email did, however, prompt an important conversation with Dr. Marshall about the nature of authenticity in relationships. "People can experience genuine connection even while being dishonest in significant ways," she observed. "The human capacity for psychological compartmentalization means emotions in one context can be authentic, even while behavior overall lacks integrity. This doesn't minimize the betrayal or justify the deception. It just acknowledges the complexity of human psychology." This perspective helped me begin separating the practical betrayal from my emotional memories. Perhaps some moments in our marriage had contained genuine connection. Perhaps Michael had, in his compartmentalized way, experienced real feelings for me. But a relationship built on systematic deception, no matter what authentic moments it might have contained, was fundamentally compromised. 3 months after discovery, the divorce was finalized with surprising efficiency. Michael's lack of contest to my financial claims and our absence of children simplified what could have been a much more protracted process. I kept our house, received substantial financial compensation for the diverted assets, and began the process of rebuilding my life with at least material security intact. The emotional rebuilding proved more challenging. Trust, once shattered so comprehensively, doesn't easily reassemble. Every new interaction, every potential connection now passed through filters of suspicion. Was this person presenting their authentic self, or a carefully constructed facade? Were they fully present, or maintaining hidden compartments in their life? The hypervigilance was exhausting, but seemed necessary in a world where decade-long deceptions had proven possible. 4 months after discovery, I experienced what felt like the first genuine moment of forward movement. Clearing out the last of Michael's belongings from the guest room closet, I found a card I'd given him years earlier, commemorating some minor relationship milestone. The message I'd written expressed such earnest love, such complete trust, that my first instinct was sadness for that naive woman who had no idea what was coming. But as I sat on the closet floor, card in hand, a different perspective emerged. The capacity for trust and wholehearted commitment I'd demonstrated wasn't naivety. It was courage. I had given myself fully to the relationship, had been authentically present in ways Michael never managed. My openness hadn't been a weakness exploited, but a strength demonstrated, even if the recipient had proven unworthy. This reframing, seeing my trust as evidence of emotional courage rather than foolish vulnerability, marked the beginning of genuine healing. The betrayal remained painful. The lost years still represented significant opportunity cost, but my own capacity for authentic connection remained intact beneath the protective layers of suspicion I'd developed. That night, I called my friend Danielle and accepted the dinner invitation I'd been declining for weeks. The conversation wasn't particularly deep, the restaurant nothing special, but the simple act of reconnecting with normal social interaction felt like a tentative step toward whatever came next. 6 months after discovery, life had established new patterns that supported functionality, if not yet flourishing. The divorce was finalized, financial matters settled, mutual friends distributed through unspoken agreements about who belonged to which social circle. I'd returned to full engagement with my consulting business, finding unexpected comfort in work that had always provided clear parameters and measurable outcomes. The most significant challenge remained rebuilding basic trust, not just in potential romantic partners, but in my own judgment. Dr. Marshall helped me recognize that trust isn't binary, but exists on a spectrum, with appropriate levels depending on relationship context and demonstrated reliability. Complete trust without verification might not be advisable for anyone, she suggested during one particularly productive session. But complete suspicion without openness prevents meaningful connection. The goal isn't returning to pre-betrayal naivety, but developing discerning trust, extending appropriate vulnerability based on consistent evidence rather than blind faith. This framework, discerning trust rather than all-or-nothing approaches, provided practical guidance for navigating new relationships. I began rebuilding my social circle carefully, accepting invitations selectively, allowing new connections to develop at measured pace, rather than either withdrawing completely or overcompensating with premature intimacy. The first significant test of this approach came when Jason, a client whose company had worked with my consulting firm for years, asked me to dinner in a context that clearly wasn't professional. My immediate internal response was suspicion. What was he really after? Was he fully available or hiding significant aspects of his life? How could I possibly know? Dr. Marshall helped me develop a balanced approach, neither paranoid investigation nor blind acceptance. Appropriate verification isn't the same as unhealthy suspicion, she pointed out. There are reasonable steps anyone might take when beginning a new relationship, regardless of past experiences. Following this guidance, I agreed to dinner with Jason but suggested a restaurant in a neighborhood where we were unlikely to have privacy for serious conversation. I did basic social media research beforehand, not obsessive stalking, just normal due diligence. I maintained light, getting to know you conversation rather than sharing significant personal history immediately. The evening proved surprisingly comfortable. Jason was engaging, respectful of boundaries, and openly shared details about his own life that could be easily verified. When he mentioned being divorced, he provided context without prompting, including timeline and amicable current relationship with his ex-wife. When he referenced work history, the details aligned with what I already knew from our professional interaction. None of this guaranteed complete honesty, of course, but it demonstrated basic congruence between presented narrative and verifiable reality. The experience helped me recognize that while Michael's deception had been exceptional in its elaborateness and duration, most people display consistency between their claims and observable behavior. 8 months after discovery, I decided to sell the house. Despite financial advantages to keeping it, the space contained too many memories, too many moments now questioned in retrospect. Each room held echoes of a relationship I could no longer trust was ever what it appeared to be. The process of decluttering for the sale became unexpectedly therapeutic. Sorting through tangible remnants of my marriage forced concrete decisions about what to preserve and what to discard. Wedding photos went into storage rather than display, neither destroyed in anger nor prominently featured in denial. Gifts from Michael were evaluated on their current utility rather than sentimental value. Items that represented genuine accomplishments or experiences maintained worth independent of the relationship's ultimate failure. This physical sorting paralleled emotional processing, separating aspects of the past decade that retained value from those compromised by deception. My career development, friendships, personal growth, and many experiences remained meaningful despite occurring within the context of a flawed marriage. The betrayal tainted but didn't erase everything that had happened during those years. 10 months after discovery, I purchased a condominium in a different neighborhood, smaller than our house, but with spectacular natural light that transformed the space, particularly in morning hours. The act of creating an environment that had never contained Michael, never witnessed our relationship, provided concrete representation of new beginnings. Furnishing this space became an exercise in self-rediscovery. What did I actually like, independent of compromise or accommodation? What colors, textures, and arrangements created comfort for me specifically? Choices that might have seemed trivial in other circumstances, the exact shade of kitchen cabinets, the orientation of the sofa, took on significance as expressions of autonomous preference after years of negotiated decisions. Professionally, the experience had paradoxically enhanced my consulting effectiveness. The heightened attention to inconsistencies, the careful verification of claims, the recognition of compartmentalization strategies, all skills developed through painful personal experience, translated into sharper analytical capabilities in business contexts. Clients commented on my improved ability to identify underlying patterns and potential disconnects in organizational communication. 1 year after discovery, I experienced what Dr. Marshall identified as an important milestone. The first day I didn't think about Michael or the betrayal at all. The realization came the following morning. I had gone an entire day focused on present concerns and future plans rather than past deceptions. The betrayal hadn't disappeared from my history, but it had ceased dominating my daily consciousness. This shift marked transition from acute recovery to integrated experience. The betrayal became part of my life story rather than its defining feature. Like a significant injury that leaves permanent scars but no longer requires daily medical attention, the emotional wound had developed sufficient healing to permit normal functioning without constant awareness of the damage. 14 months after discovery, I agreed to a proper date with Jason, whose respectful patience had demonstrated consistency over time. Our relationship developed with deliberate pace, neither rushing toward premature commitment nor artificially delaying natural connection. I disclosed my history of betrayal when the relationship reached appropriate seriousness, neither leading with past trauma nor concealing significant experience that shaped my approach to trust. His response proved thoughtful rather than defensive or dismissive, acknowledging the legitimate impact such betrayal would have on anyone while demonstrating through consistent behavior his own integrity. Most importantly, he recognized that trust following such experience develops through demonstrated reliability rather than demanded faith. 16 months after discovery, I received unexpected news through a mutual acquaintance. Michael had apparently moved permanently to Chicago, where he now lived openly with Rebecca. They had reconciled after their own period of separation, choosing to attempt rebuilding their relationship with at least the foundation of complete knowledge about each other's existence. The information produced complex emotions, not jealousy or desire for reconciliation, but reflection on the irony that his relationship built on deception might potentially transform into something authentic, now that the compartmentalization had collapsed. Whether such transformation was actually possible remained questionable, but the attempt itself represented an interesting coda to our shared history. More surprising than my lack of jealousy was my genuine hope that Rebecca had negotiated better boundaries and greater transparency than I had managed. Whatever her decision to reconcile might indicate about her own judgment, she deserved honesty moving forward, as did anyone entangled with Michael's complex capacity for compartmentalization. This unexpected compassion for a woman I'd never met but with whom I shared uniquely parallel experience marked significant emotional evolution, the capacity to see beyond my personal pain, to recognize the broader human implications of what had happened. 2 years after discovering my husband's double life, I sat across from Jason on the patio of a restaurant overlooking the lake, celebrating our first anniversary as a couple. The evening was perfect. Warm breeze, spectacular sunset, excellent food, comfortable conversation. Happiness that once seemed irrevocably lost had gradually re-emerged in new forms, with greater appreciation for its presence. "What are you thinking about?" Jason asked, noticing my momentary distraction. "How different my life is from what I expected," I replied honestly. 2 years ago, I thought I was celebrating a 10th anniversary with someone who turned out to be living a completely different reality than the one I occupied. Now, I'm celebrating a first anniversary with someone I never anticipated meeting. Jason reached for my hand across the table. "Regrets?" The question deserved thoughtful consideration rather than automatic reassurance. "Not about us," I clarified immediately. "But sometimes I wonder about the years invested in something that wasn't what I thought. Whether different choices might have led to earlier awareness or better outcomes." "That's natural," he acknowledged. "But from what you've described, Michael's deception was exceptionally sophisticated. Most people couldn't maintain that level of compartmentalization for so long. His observation echoed what various professionals had emphasized throughout my recovery process, that the betrayal reflected extraordinary capacity for psychological compartmentalization rather than obvious signs I should have recognized. This perspective had helped diminish self-blame without minimizing the legitimate impact of such profound deception. The strangest part, I continued, is realizing I've gained wisdom I wouldn't trade, despite the painful acquisition method. I understand trust differently now, not just in romantic relationships, but in all human connections. This represented perhaps the most significant transformation, developing nuanced understanding of trust as continuous assessment rather than binary state. Trust wasn't something established once then maintained indefinitely without verification. It required ongoing evidence, appropriate transparency, and consistent alignment between words and actions. In practical terms, this meant approaching relationships with appropriate verification rather than blind faith. With Jason, this had manifested as normal due diligence, meeting friends and family who confirmed his presented history, observing consistent behavior across contexts, noticing alignment between claimed values and actual choices. These weren't expressions of unhealthy suspicion, but reasonable assessment of trustworthiness applicable to any relationship. The experience had also clarified my understanding of integrity as integration, the consistency between internal values, expressed commitments, and observable behavior. Michael's fundamental failure hadn't been loving someone else, but maintaining radically separate psychological compartments that prevented integrated existence. He had lived divided rather than whole, with each relationship receiving partial presence rather than complete engagement. This insight influenced my approach to my own integrity, striving for congruence between values, communications, and actions across all life domains. The compartmentalization that had enabled Michael's deception represented a fragmentation I now consciously avoided, preferring integration that might sometimes create tension, but prevented fundamental disconnection between different aspects of identity. Perhaps most importantly, the experience had transformed my relationship with uncertainty. Before Michael's betrayal, I had operated with implicit assumption that sufficient knowledge and careful planning could prevent significant disruption. The dramatic collapse of that assumption had initially created hypervigilance, but eventually developed into more realistic relationship with life's fundamental unpredictability. I had learned that security doesn't come from controlling external circumstances or preventing all possible betrayals, but from developing internal resilience that can withstand even profound disruption. The worst had happened. My marriage had been revealed as partially fictional, my decade of investment built on incomplete foundation, yet I had survived, rebuilt, even eventually thrived. This hard-won resilience provided paradoxical freedom. Having navigated devastating betrayal without complete destruction, ordinary relationship challenges lost some of their threatening quality. Disagreements with Jason didn't trigger catastrophic anxiety because I had experienced actual relationship catastrophe and discovered my capacity to recover. The knowledge that I could survive worst-case scenarios allowed greater presence during normal uncertainties. I think, I said to Jason, continuing our anniversary conversation, that experiencing profound betrayal eventually creates capacity for deeper appreciation of genuine connection. When you've seen the counterfeit up close, you recognize the authentic more readily. He nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense, though I wish you could have gained that wisdom through less painful means. So do I acknowledged with a small smile. But since that wasn't an option, I'm grateful for the growth that emerged from the experience, the perspective that developed through rebuilding. As we finished dinner and walked along the lakefront, hand in hand in comfortable silence, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 2 years. The anniversary party I'd planned for Michael and me had been intended to celebrate relationship longevity, the simple accumulation of shared years. But longevity itself guaranteed nothing about relationship quality, as my decade with Michael had painfully demonstrated. What I celebrated now with Jason wasn't primarily time accumulated, but connection authentically shared. The genuine presence possible when both people occupy the same reality rather than parallel existences. The foundation wasn't perfect certainty about the future, but mutual commitment to integrity in the present, consistent alignment between values, communications, and actions that created trustworthy connection. The betrayal that had shattered my previous life had ultimately revealed essential truths about authentic relationship that might otherwise have remained theoretical. Through painful experience, I had developed wisdom about trust, integrity, and resilience that now informed not just romantic connection, but all significant relationships. 3 days after our anniversary dinner, I received an unexpected email from Rebecca, the first direct communication between us despite our parallel experiences with the same man. The message was brief, but clearly carefully composed. I hope this isn't unwelcome contact. I've debated reaching out for months, but finally decided you deserve to know that Michael has been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. His psychiatrist believes this explains his exceptional capacity for compartmentalization and maintenance of separate lives. This doesn't excuse his choices, but might provide context for what happened. I thought this information might help with any lingering questions about how such elaborate deception was possible for so long. I wish you well in your continuing life journey. The diagnosis explained much while resolving little. Michael's extraordinary ability to maintain separate existences had indeed suggested psychological mechanisms beyond typical compartmentalization. But understanding the clinical framework didn't diminish the impact of the deception or change the fundamental breach of trust that had occurred. I responded with equal brevity, thanking Rebecca for the information while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Whatever Michael's psychological diagnosis, our shared experience with his divided existence created strange connection without justifying further entanglement. We had both been unwitting participants in someone else's fragmented reality, a bizarre bond that acknowledged without requiring ongoing relationship. The final insight emerged gradually over the months following this exchange, the recognition that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, understanding doesn't necessitate reconciliation, and closure comes not from external resolution, but internal integration of difficult experience into coherent life narrative. I would never fully understand every aspect of Michael's deception or completely resolve every question about our shared decade, but I had developed sufficient integration to move forward without these unresolved elements preventing meaningful connection or personal growth. The anniversary he had forgotten, choosing instead to celebrate with someone else, had ultimately catalyzed transformation far more significant than any planned celebration could have accomplished. Through the painful collapse of illusion, I had discovered capacity for resilience, discernment, and authentic connection beyond what comfortable security might have developed. The forgotten anniversary had revealed essential truth, however painfully delivered. And the wisdom gained through that revelation, though acquired at tremendous cost, had ultimately created foundation for more authentic living than the relationship built on partial presence and compartmentalized engagement could ever have provided. TLDR. I spent 3 months planning a surprise 10th anniversary party for my husband, only to discover he missed it because he was celebrating his 5th anniversary with another woman in Chicago. Investigation revealed he'd been living a complete double life for years, with another home, separate finances, and a woman who thought she was his wife. After divorce and therapy, I've rebuilt my life and learned profound lessons about trust and authenticity. 2 years later, I'm in a healthy relationship built on genuine transparency, rather than the illusion of connection I had before. Edit. Many have asked if there were signs I missed. Looking back, there were subtle clues. His insistence on separate finances, managing his own calendar, frequent conferences that increased about 5 years ago. But his deception was exceptionally sophisticated. I later learned he has been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, which explains his extraordinary ability to maintain completely separate lives. Update. 2 years later. Life has transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. I've sold our house, changed careers slightly, and found a relationship built on actual transparency rather than illusion. Michael and Rebecca apparently reconciled and live together in Chicago now. The most surprising outcome is the wisdom gained. I understand authentic connection much more deeply now, and while I'd never choose this painful path to insight, I value the perspective it's given me about what real partnership requires.